We can begin. Welcome, everybody. It's very nice to see all the people that are new. So, for those of you who have been with me for a long time, or you're not new at all, I want to tell you sort of what happened is Bretta Graham, who's not here today, but is often with us. She's been encouraging me to let more people, more women know what we do here because what we do here is so special. And so I put a post on Facebook, and then somebody copied it into another group, and I got dozens and dozens of people asking about the class. Not everybody that asked about it decided to join us, but we have a lot of new faces, and I'm just so delighted that you're here. And I hope that this will be good for you and good for your souls and good for your growth towards God. So I want to start with something I didn't mention in the group, but it's a conversation that I've had a bunch of times, most recently with Vicky, but also with a lot of people here in Israel. And it's just a framework I want to give you for dealing with the time that we're living in. Okay, so I don't know all of you, I don't know all of your stories, but certainly I know that all of the people that have been with me for a while are very connected to Israel and very connected to the news from Israel and what's happening, and both in terms of just caring about Israel and the Jewish people and our future here, but also in terms of what's happening in biblical prophecy and how what's happening is playing out of is a playing out of biblical prophecy. So here's what I want to say. None of us, as far as I know, are members of Knesset in Israel. And most of us, I would venture to say, are probably not um, influential in terms of international politics and so forth. And so God didn't pick us to be in those roles and to have a specific direct influence on what's going on. And as a result of that, we don't have influence in that domain. This is my own personal perspective. I find it very helpful in staying balanced, what we call in Hebrew ragua, like regulated, that we don't go up and down, up and down, up and down emotionally and spiritually based on what's going on in the news. And so, what is our job? Since we are not part of we're not God and we're not politicians, then our job is to stay focused on what is God asking of us at this time. And the fact that you're here and you're participating in a live Torah class from Israel is deeply, deeply significant, because I think it's an indication of the fact that your soul is awake and alive and that you want to grow and grow closer to God. And that is what we're all about. I've told many of you privately, but I'll just say it again for all of us, that there are women in this group along a whole range of theological positions. So there are some women who go to church on Sunday. There are some women who have left Sunday church, but they have a significant spiritual relationship with Yeshua or with Jesus, whatever they call him. There are people who are identify as Noahides. There are people who are investigating conversion or in that process. There's a whole range. There are some people who identify as Jews, and what we are with each other is a safe and loving space. We don't judge one another's journeys, and all we do is learn Torah. Okay. Having said that, let's learn a little bit. So this year, you know that we are devoting our year to the Haftarot. And so first, I want to start by explaining what that means and where it comes from. So we, I hope, are all familiar with the concept that the five books of Moses is divided into weekly Torah portions. There are 54 of them, so some weeks more than one is read at a time, because obviously 54 and 52 don't match. But along with each weekly Torah portion is a reading from the books of prophets. Now, let me just go back and say that in a Hebrew Bible, there are three sections. One is we call Torah, which is the five books of Moses, starting from Bereshit, Genesis. I always have trouble doing this in English. Genesis, Um, what's the next one? What is the next book in English? Genesis.
Numbers. Numbers.
Exodus.
No, isn't Numbers
Oh,
the
Genesis. No,
Exodus.
Genesis,
Exodus.
Exodus,
Exodus? Thank you.
Exodus.
Genesis,
Very good.
Exodus,
Numbers,
Leviticus.
Leviticus,
Numbers,
Numbers,
and then
Leviticus.
Leviticus, Numbers,
Leviticus
and then
and Deuteronomy, right?
Deuteronomy.
Okay. Okay, that's the core of the Torah. That's what's in a Torah scroll. But the rest of the Hebrew Bible has books of prophets and also this miscellaneous collection that we call writings, or in Hebrew Ketuvim, which just means writings. So the Haftarah is a small section of verses from the books of prophets, what we call the Nevi'im. A Haftarah is somewhere between 10 to about 50 verses. So it's not as long as a Torah portion. And in synagogues in Israel, in synagogues in the Jewish community, it is read on Shabbat or holidays after the Torah reading. Typically, the Haftarah has a thematic connection to the Torah reading. Now, how did this system come about? The the best known explanation of how this whole thing began dates to the time of the Hanukkah story. So we're talking about approximately 165 years BCE. So this is about 2,200 years ago or so. In Israel, there's a Greek. Israel's under Greek dominion, and there's a Greek king named Antiochus. I don't know what you call him, but Antiochus is what we call him. And he did not like the Jews doing their own things. And so one of the Jewish practices that he banned was Torah reading. And a Torah reading, because the Torah is in a scroll even until today, it was very obvious if the Jews were still reading from the Torah. And so in place of reading the Torah portion of the week, congregations began reading a selection from the books of prophets. And since they were read from a book and not a scroll, the government spies or whoever he sent in to check and make sure the Jews weren't doing anything they weren't supposed to be doing, they did not realize what was going on. So ironically, Antiochus, who is this Greek king, is credited with introducing a new form of Torah study because he brought selections from the books of prophets kind of into the mainstream. That is one explanation of where the Haftarot come from and when we started saying them. Even though nobody is forbidden from reading from a Torah scroll today, we maintain this practice until today in every Jewish synagogue. Okay, there is a Rabbi Soloveitchik, profoundly influential American Orthodox rabbi, who actually died in 1993. He suggested that the purpose of the Haftarah is primarily to strengthen our belief in the final redemption and in the coming of the Messiah. And that's because each time we read a section from the books of prophets, it's preceded by blessings and it is followed by blessings. So there's sort of like parentheses around the reading itself. And the blessings after the reading of the Haftarah emphasize redemption. So I want to share them with you a little bit. This is what Jews say in synagogue after they've read this section of the prophets. Okay. And I'll have a little commentary. So one is, have mercy on Zion. This is a reference to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. For it is the source of our life. To the one who is deeply humiliated, that is a reference to Israel, who has suffered throughout history at the hands of her enemies and also been exiled from the Holy Temple for 2,000 years. Even though I live in Israel right now and Natalie is here in Israel, there are people living here, but the fact is we do not have the third temple. And so we have been exiled from life, religious life with a temple in Jerusalem for 2,000 years. That was my aside. The blessing continues, bring salvation speedily, salvation meaning the redemption. Blessed are you, Hashem, who gladdens Zion through her children. And then it goes on to say, gladden us, Hashem, our God, with Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi. Who is Elijah the prophet? According to Jewish tradition, he is the prophet that will announce the imminent coming of the Messiah. So gladden us, Hashem, our God, with Elijah the prophet. The blessing is saying, please, let's bring him on stage to do his thing so that we know that the Messiah is coming very quickly. And with the kingdom of the House of David, of course, is another reference to the messianic figure who is descended from King David, according to our tradition. Your anointed, may he come speedily and cause our hearts to exalt. On his throne, let no stranger sit, nor others continue to inherit his honor. For by your holy name you swore to him that his lamp will not be extinguished forever and ever. Blessed are you, Hashem, shield of David. Okay, so where you may have heard this idea that the lamp of King David will never be extinguished. What does that mean? To us in our tradition, the Torah tradition, is that the Messiah is descended from King David. There is always a lineage that comes from King David, and that will never cease. And so where do we see this? So there's a couple places that I found in the Bible. One is in what I call Malachim Aleph, which is First Kings chapter 11, verse 36, that talks about um, here's the verse. And his son I shall give one tribe, so that David my servant may have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I chose for myself to place my name there. That's in First Kings chapter 11, verse 36. Interestingly enough, the word that is translated as lamp is ner, which is literally in Hebrew the word for a light bulb. When you go shopping for a light bulb in Israel, you ask for a ner. But it also means a kingdom, and it also means a yoke over Israel. So all of that is hidden in this concept of this lamp. Here's another one. This is in Second Kings, Malachim Bet, Second Kings chapter 8, verse 19. Now the Lord was unwilling to destroy Judah for the sake of his servant David, as he said to him to give him a lamp. Again, the Hebrew word here is ner, for his children for all time. And the third reference that I found is in Second Chronicles, what I call Divrei Hayamim Bet. Now the Lord was unwilling to destroy the house of David because of the covenant that he made with David. And he said to give him a lamp, again, the word ner in Hebrew, and to his sons for all time. So these are three biblical proofs of this concept that we find in the blessing after the Haftarah, that the lamp of David will never be extinguished. Now, just the act of voluntarily submitting to God's law is referred to in Jewish thought as taking on the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. This represents a commitment to following the commandments and living according to whatever God's will is for you based on your status in the world. Okay, so that's why Rabbi Soloveitchik says that the Haftarah is connected to a yearning or a longing or a constant reminder of the messianic future. So okay, I don't know who it is because I can't see the comments so well, but First Kings 11:36, Second Kings 8:19, and Second Chronicles 21:7. Now, what does this word haftarah mean? I will sometimes say haftarah, which might make you think that it has something to do with Torah. But despite the fact that the names sound similar, Haftarah is actually not related to Torah. Haftarah is spelled with the Hebrew letter Tet, and Torah is spelled with the Hebrew letter Tuf. Those of you that were with me when we did the Hebrew letters, you know there's two Hebrew letters that both make the same sound, which means these words, Torah and Haftarah, they're two completely different words. So again, it's correctly pronounced as Haftarah, but I will say Haftarah because that's the way I learned how to say it. But again, I want you to be clear that it's not grammatically connected to the word Torah. The meaning of the word is multifaceted. I'm going to tell you a few of them. The clearest one is, I mentioned to you that the Jews were prohibited from reading the Torah by Antiochus. So they exempted themselves from this obligation. The word patur, haftarah, patur, I don't know if you can hear the similarity. Patur means exemption. So they exempted themselves from the obligation to read from a Torah scroll because that was prohibited by the ruling power. And they replaced it with reading the Haftarah. Okay. Haftarah and patur have the same Hebrew root, which, if for those of you that know Hebrew, it's pei tet resh. Another meaning of pei tet resh means to conclude. So the Haftarah is the final reading of the morning synagogue service. it follows the first we have a Torah reading, which comes from the first 5 books, and then we have the Haftarah reading. So at the end of that, that concludes the biblical readings of the morning service. Now, you will find, like the Torah portions, Haftarot frequently start or end or both in the middle of a biblical chapter. So you may be familiar with the idea that the whole chapter and verse system was invented by Christian scholars. It's not a Jewish invention. Jews use it as it's a it's a useful tool, but the way that Christian scholars divided up the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, doesn't always match the conceptual way that Jews understand the Bible. Okay, so that's why the both Torah portions and Haftarot are sometimes starting or ending not cleanly, like, oh, we're going to read chapter 12. It's not like that. Okay. So each week, what I want to do as we go forward is to share with you what connection did the rabbis find between the Torah portion and the Haftarah? Why did they match them? So they had to develop this system that would remind people. Remember that the people of those days were much more, at least the people that went to hear the Torah reading on Shabbat, they were much more literate than your average Jew today. And so they would get that there was a hint in the Haftarah that would remind them what the Torah portion was. This week it happens that it's incredibly clear, but the strength of the connection is going to vary from week to week. Also, there's some minor differences among different Jewish communities regarding which text they read in a particular week. So, for example, this week is Parshat Noah. Let me just see if I can mute her. Okay. This week is Parshat Noach. And this week, Sfardim read the first 10 verses from the book of Isaiah, chapter 54. And the standard Ashkenazi reading continues until chapter 55, verse 5. So we're going to go, because I'm Ashkenazi, we're going to go with the Ashkenazi usually. But just so you know, there are sometimes some differences. Also, there are some sections of the books of prophets that are never used for a Haftarah. Usually, it's because there's verses in there that are seen as insulting to the Jewish people or to Jerusalem. Also, the Haftarot never come from the third section of Tanakh. They never come from Ketuvim. They never come from the books of the Hebrew Bible that we call the writings. Some say that's because the custom of reading a Haftarah on Shabbat started before the books of Ketuvim were canonized. And another explanation is that the obligation to study the books of prophets is a higher level obligation. It's more important to study the books of prophets than to study the writings, which is a little hard to understand because for example, the entire book of Psalms is part of the section of the Hebrew Bible that we call the writings, but nevertheless, that's the case. Okay. Still a little background because this is our first time doing this. I have to give you a little bit more background before we can get into the actual Haftarah for this week. So more Haftarot come from the book of Isaiah than from any other books of prophets. So out of the 54 weekly Torah portions, between 21 and 24 of the Haftarot come from the book of Isaiah, which I call Yeshayahu. Okay. And in the summer, there's a long series of them, like week after week after week, that come from the book of Isaiah. And these are called the 7 weeks of consolation. And they begin with the Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, which we refer to as Shabbat Nachamu. The Shabbat gets its name actually from the Haftarah of that week because it begins with the words Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, which means be comforted, my people. These are Isaiah's words to the Jewish people. And it comes from Isaiah chapter 40. And that is read on that particular week. The book of Isaiah is 66, I think it's 66 chapters. The last third of it focuses heavily on the theme of consolation, and all of those 7 weeks of consolation after Tisha B'Av are all about consolation for the destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Okay, there also the Haftarot for the morning of Yom Kippur, the last day of Pesach, Anytime that Rosh Chodesh, the new month, falls on Shabbat. By the way, um, today, tonight, wherever you are, it is Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, so Chodesh Tov, a good month to you. And also fast days also come from the book of Yeshayahu, of Isaiah. So I want to just review a little bit about it because it's going to figure prominently in our study this year. So who was Isaiah? I'll just call him Isaiah, just not to confuse you. Um, Isaiah was one of the most important prophets during the First Temple period. He himself was descended from King David. His father was a prophet whose name was Amos, and his uncle Amaziah was one of the kings of Judea. So he came from a royal family. And because he came from a royal family, he was able to rebuke the royal family when it was necessary because he wasn't intimidated by royalty in the way that um, a prophet from a more modest background might have been. Generally speaking, Isaiah's prophecies were directed to the Jewish people, but some related to the nations, the non-Jewish nations around them. So he has prophecies that relate to Babylonia, to Moab, to Egypt, to Edom, and other non-Jewish nations that interacted in the time of the First Temple with the land of Israel. Most of his hopeful and uplifting messages, or many of them, are part of the liturgy, the formal liturgy of the Jewish people. Um, and you will know some of you already. I don't know how well you know the book of Isaiah, but you already know some of them. We'll talk. I'll just talk briefly about some of the most famous ones. But he called generally for the Jewish people to return to God, which is pretty much what all prophets do. For the wicked to abandon their evil, and for all people to seek out God. He spoke of a future time of redemption when all the nations of the earth will recognize God as the ultimate sovereign, what I call the creator and sustainer of the universe, and they will seek out his teachings as they emanate from Jerusalem. So right now, I'm sitting probably about less than 10 miles from Jerusalem, just south of Jerusalem. So in a way, this technology and the opportunity that we have to learn together is a partial fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. Um, and I'll just read it to you. And many people shall go and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths." Here's the part I want you to listen to. For out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Okay, now I'm not saying that I'm qualified to be a fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy, but clearly the fact that the internet and this technology allows us to be studying together. I'm sitting in Israel, you're all over the world, and God, the word of the Lord, to the extent that I represent or I share biblical text with you, is streaming to you um, from Jerusalem. So that's one way of understanding it. Now, Isaiah also had a vision of peace in the Messianic era. You may be familiar with the fact that I don't like to say this because they're not friends of Israel's right now, but the UN Plaza in New York has the words of Isaiah's vision of peace engraved on one of the walls, coming from Isaiah 2, chapter 4. And he shall judge among the nations, and they shall decide for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares. That's what I believe. Though they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Okay, so that's straight out of Isaiah. Very, very famous, both of those prophecies. Isaiah prophesied from around 740 BCE to around 700 BCE. So he lived more than a century before the destruction of the first temple. Okay, that's important to keep in mind. The first temple was up, operating, functioning in his lifetime. Okay, what else happened in his lifetime? The northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, were conquered and exiled by Assyria in his lifetime, approximately 722 BCE. Jerusalem and the temple were threatened by the Assyrians, especially when Hizkiyahu, the king you may know as Hezekiah, was in power. But Jerusalem and the temple were not destroyed in his lifetime. He did not live to see the temple destroyed. He just said, "If you guys don't get your act," I'm paraphrasing, "you don't get your act together, you're going to lose this amazing gift that God has given us. There was, at the end of his life, there was a king in power whose name was Menashe. I don't know what you call him. Um, anyway, he was wicked, and he made up basically some lashon hara about Isaiah and his teachings, claiming that he was teaching heretical things, and he had Isaiah put to death. Okay, that is very, very quickly the a little bit about what a haftarah is and where it comes from, and a little bit about the book of Isaiah, which now let's turn to the Haftarah of this week's Torah portion. This is the portion that will be read in synagogues all over the world. Um, the Torah portion is Noach, or you may say Noah. The Haftarah comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 54, starts in verse 1, and it goes in the Ashkenazi tradition to chapter 55, verse 5. And what does it talk about? It talks about the Jewish people throughout the generations and ensures them that despite everything that they've experienced, that God will not forsake them and redemption will come. Here's the background. It's a metaphor where Jerusalem is compared to a woman who betrayed her husband and was thrown out of the house. And now she's living alone and she's very embarrassed. And her husband now wants to forgive her for her betrayal. And he wants to reassure her that he was angry and they needed to spend some time apart, but he never intended that their separation would be permanent. Okay, it's a metaphor, right? So it's God is the husband in this metaphor. Israel is the wife in this metaphor, and Jerusalem is the family home. You get the metaphor? Just yes? Okay. So the parallel is that the Jewish people have felt that God has at times rejected or abandoned them. And Yeshayahu, Isaiah, is assuring them that that's not the case and that the process of redemption will prove it to the whole world. This parallels what a lot of you have experienced in your journey as Christians or out of Christianity, that what you were taught about replacement theology, and that you understand now that God never relinquished his relationship with the Jewish people. And at one time, I had the opportunity I interviewed a Catholic, I guess he was a priest, but he didn't have like his own congregation. He was a young guy, and he's a Zionist. Now, the truth is that Christian Zionists do not generally tend to come from Catholic backgrounds, but he was unusual in this regard. And he told me that when the state of Israel was founded in 1948, in other words, when God gave dominion to this land back to the people that he promised to biblically, it was a historical event that caused a lot of Christians, especially Catholics, to rethink their understanding of replacement theology, right? So if God is still in a relationship with his people and still connecting his people to his land, then maybe what replacement theology taught, that God has abandoned the Jewish people, isn't true. You see how that follows. So that's sort of what Isaiah is telling us, is that you may feel abandoned, you may feel like God doesn't want to have anything to do with you anymore, but it's not true. So let's get a little bit more literal, that Jerusalem, after the destruction of the temple, is compared to a barren woman, a woman who has no children. And God is urging Jerusalem to rejoice because the time is going to come when the Jewish nation will return and proliferate and repopulate the cities in Israel that have been desolate for a long time. Now, this actually happened in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, when the Jews returned from the Babylonian exile. So I want to make sure that the timeline is clear. Isaiah is alive and saying these words when the temple is still standing, but he knows that it's going to get destroyed. And he knows that the Jews are going to be exiled, but he also knows that they're going to come back and rebuild and repopulate. Okay. But the words of Isaiah are also speaking about our days. So, yes, the Jews returned yes, they were exiled after the destruction of the first temple. Yes, they spent 70 years in Babylonia. Yes, they came back to rebuild the second temple. But exactly what he's saying in these words is happening again in our days, and is preparation for the third temple. A lot of what Isaiah teaches operates on multiple levels. So it's true maybe about his time that he lived in and time in the future, but also time in the way future, like in our days. So he's assuring that that God hasn't forsaken them, even though God has momentarily hidden his countenance, turned his face away. He's going to bring them back from exile. He's going to bring them back very mercifully. Okay. And if we look at chapter 54, verses 7 through 8, there's some very beautiful language here. He says, he's speaking on behalf of God, Isaiah. For a brief moment, I have forsaken you, and with abundant mercy, I shall gather you in. With a slight wrath, I have concealed my countenance from you for a moment, but with eternal kindness shall I show you mercy, said your Redeemer, Hashem. It reminds me of parenting in a way that if, let's say that you have a kid who is misbehaving and you are very disappointed or upset with your child and you don't want to be in their presence and you say I get out of my face, but it doesn't mean that you don't still love your child, and it doesn't mean that when you've come back, like you've calmed down, that you won't welcome your child back with a hug and to reestablish that connection and relationship. Okay, that's sort of, I often see, and I think I've spoken about this before, a parallel between the way God thinks of us and the way we, like, parenting is a great example, a great example is maybe not the right word. Like, it's just a great way of understanding God's relationship to us. So this Haftarah compares the final redemption to the pact that God made, and this is where it's exactly connecting to the Torah portion, to the pact that God made with Noah in this week's Torah portion. Just as God promised never to bring a flood over the entire earth again in the Torah portion of Noah, so he will never again be that angry with his people. So if you look at Isaiah chapter 54, verse 9, he says literally, "For it is like the waters of Noach to me," as this is God talking, "as I swore not to let the waters of Noach pass over the land, so too have I sworn not to be angry at you or chastise you." Now, there is rarely as direct a connection between the Parsha and the Haftarah as this, but it even says the word Noach in the section. So if you can imagine that you're living in Israel in the time of Antiochus, you're not allowed to read from the Torah, but you know that like a few weeks after Sukkot is over, it's the Torah portion of Noach, and then you are reading this Haftarah, and it reminds you of everything you know about the Torah portion of Noach. That's sort of how it functioned, the way that I understand it. Although I was not alive in the time of the Hanukkah miracle, as far as I know. Okay, what are some universal lessons that we can take from this Haftarah portion? I have four. Okay, one is that humanity, collectively, has the ability to both destroy the world and to save the world. There's in the late 18th century, early 19th century, there is a very famous Hasidic master that we call Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who was the founder of the Breslov movement. Not important if you don't know who he is, but he taught this concept. If you believe you can destroy, believe you can repair. If you have the capacity to fail or to cause damage, whether it's morally or spiritually or emotionally, then by definition, according to this lesson, you also have the capacity to heal and to repair and to return. It's one of the most famous Breslov teachings, and it's often quoted in the context of either teshuva, meaning repentance, renewal, or resilience and mental health. Like if a person is depressed or addicted or is struggling with something, the concept is if you have the capacity to destroy, you also have the capacity to repair. And also, it's hope for both personal redemption and national redemption. So in the Torah portion of Noach, we see that humanity slides into immorality until God is just like, he's had it up to here. He's fed up. Humanity has pushed the universe that God created to the brink of destruction. But Noah comes along and he saves the world. So the message who was he? There's 10 generations between Adam and Noah until he becomes the guy who God picks to build the ark and to save the animals and to save a fragment of life so that God can destroy and start over. We don't know anything about who he was. He was something of a nobody, but he saved the world. And the message is that none of us should consider ourselves so small or insignificant that we can't make a difference. Okay, so that's the first lesson. Humanity has the ability to both save the world and destroy it. And that message of humanity also relates to us as individuals. So anything that we have the capacity to destroy, we have the capacity to repair. The second lesson is the lesson of divine compassion after judgment. And I read this verse to you, chapter Isaiah 54:7. For a brief moment I forsook you, but with great compassion I will gather you. So what's the lesson? When humanity experiences destruction, like with the flood in the time of Noah, it's not the end of the game. It's not God's final word, because mercy always follows judgment. So the flood story and this Haftarah portion both teach that ultimately, even though he has to destroy, he has to punish us sometimes, that God's ultimate desire is to restore, not to destroy. Okay, so um, the destruction is what happens on the way to restoration, if that makes sense. So sometimes things just have to be destroyed. I'm thinking of let me see if this holds water. I'm thinking of when you have, let's say that you have your appendix is diseased, okay, and it has to come out. So if you don't understand what's going on, it looks like, they're going to cut you open and rip something out of you that looks like destruction, but it's actually restoration, because your health is going to be restored. I'm not sure that analogy holds water, but that's what came to my mind. But anyway, everyone, Jew and non-Jew, can rely or draw hope from this idea that anytime God is punishing, it's always temporary and it's always on the path of renewal. So this is a reflection of the idea of teshuvah, of turning away from doing wrong, is exactly what restores our relationship with Hashem. So that divine compassion after judgment, that's another thing that we learned from this Haftarah. Two more lessons. God's promise of peace is eternal. And in Isaiah chapter 54, verse 10, there's this. This is again God talking to his people. For the mountains may move and the hills may collapse, but my kindness shall not depart from you, neither shall the covenant of my peace collapse. So what's the lesson? The promises of God are eternal. The rainbow in the story of Noah and the covenant of peace in this piece of Isaiah both symbolize God's eternal commitment to humanity, that he's never going to destroy us again, and that he is ultimately going to bring redemption. And so that this can reassure people, I hope, that even when the world feels unstable, and this is sort of what I was saying at the beginning, but I'm just going to deepen it a little bit and say that we are all being asked to cling to God more now than ever before. And the reason, I don't know if the reason, but the fact that the world is shaky, the fact that everybody feels unstable, unsettled, we never know what the next day's news is going to bring. This is an opportunity for us to work on our emunah, to work on our connection with Hashem, to work on our faithfulness. And this lesson is God will meet us in this process, that even when the world feels shaky, if you hold on to the rope, this is the analogy that I've spoken about with you many times. If you hold on to the rope and hold on to your emunah, hold on to your belief that God is running the world, as I always say, then you'll be okay. Okay, because Isaiah reminds us, and the rainbow in the story of Noah reminds us that he might have to temporarily punish or destroy or whatever, but ultimately He wants, it's like when you punish your kids, you probably, maybe you've said it yourself as a parent, that if you've had, I don't know that I ever hit my kids, but I have heard of this, that parents will say, this hurts me a lot more than it hurts you, right? So the kid feels the the physical pain of a slap or a punch, or, well, hopefully not a punch, but a slap or whatever. But the parent feels it in another way. So God doesn't, according to the way I'm understanding these verses, God doesn't, he doesn't like punishing us, but sometimes we have to be punished. Okay. And I have five actually. I thought there were four. Okay. The number four is the idea of a moral humanity. So both Isaiah and the story of Noah imply that society, in order to be successful, has to be built on righteousness, justice, compassion. And so Noah preserved life through obedience with God. And Isaiah's future vision of redemption is saying to the whole world, listen to God, return to God. That's where it's going to be. So God expects all of humanity to act ethically, whether it is fulfilling the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the seven Noahide laws, the moral foundation for all people, or the 613 mitzvot of the Jewish people, or however you understand, God expects all of us to follow the laws that are relevant for us, and that will help ensure that the society that we build is built on good things: justice, compassion, righteousness, and so forth. And the fifth, just looking at the time. Okay. The fifth lesson is that all nations share in the blessing. Okay. So in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 5, um, it is a call to other nations that God's redemption is for everybody. We've spoken about this idea on a number of occasions, that when God brings the messianic redeemer, when God builds or gives us the third temple in Jerusalem, when God brings peace between Israel and its neighbors, or peace wherever between Russia and Ukraine or whatever, that all of those steps of redemption are for everybody. So the Jewish people have a specific role of Or LaGoyim, to be a light to the nations, inviting the rest of the nations to walk with them, to walk with us in towards what is ultimately the truth of God. And so this is a universal mission. So the Jewish people are walking out this mission of sharing the oneness of God with the world, but humanity has to walk beside us in recognizing and serving the creator and the sustainer of the world. So similarly, so this is true in redemptive times, but also the descendants of Noah are the ancestors of all of the nations. So every person, if you're alive now, you have a place in God's plan for redemption, a place in God's plan for the goodness that He is um, wanting to bring into the world. There, okay, in my neighborhood in Efrat, there's a synagogue that is, number one, very popular, but also very popular with English speakers. And the rabbi of the synagogue is somebody named Rabbi Shlomo Katz. Some of you may be familiar with him. Before he was a rabbi of a synagogue, he was a musician, a Jewish musician. And he wrote a song called Everlasting Love. He wrote many, many songs. Many of them are based on either Bible or Jewish liturgy. And because I haven't figured out how to play this for you while we're together, I'm going to put it in the group. But the song is called Everlasting Love, and it is two verses, one from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verse 2, where Jeremiah says, he's quoting God, "With everlasting love I have loved you, therefore I have drawn you to me with loving kindness." And the second verse of the song comes from this Haftarah, from chapter 54, verse 10. The way he says it is, so he sings it in Hebrew and then he sings it in English in the link that I'm going to send you after class. The mountains may crumble and the hillside may fade away, but my love for you will never end. That's a paraphrase of Isaiah 54:10. which comes from this week's Haftarah. Okay, so I just talked really fast and I gave you like a lot of stuff. I'm going to send you the link to the song, but I want to close my notes and ask if anybody has any questions before we finish up for today. If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself. Helen, you want to say something?
Yes, please. I thought that was fascinating about King David. The Mashiach will be a descendant of King David. But he lived like 3,000 years ago. How can you establish that after all this time?
That's an interesting question. Um, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe there are family traditions. I mean, but here's what I know is this is one of the differences between the way Christians think of the Messiah and the way Jews think of the Messiah is this is like a requirement. If for somebody to be recognized as the Messianic Redeemer, that's why in Hebrew we refer to him as Mashiach ben David, Messiah, son of David. Okay,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
he comes from the line of David. Now,
Okay.
David was from the tribe of Judah. Okay. And
Yes.
so we do after the Judah was one of the two tribes that was not exiled when the 10 tribes were exiled. So
Yes.
most of Jews that are this is so I have got to show you guys this. I just got this t-shirt and it says, oh, I don't know if you see it. Jews are from Judea. Can you see this?
Oh,
Okay.
brilliant.
And it happens that where
Fantastic.
I love it. So where I live in Israel is the land south of Jerusalem that was
Mhm.
the portion of the tribe
Mhm.
of Judah way, way back. Okay. So most Jews today are either, not always, but um, from Judah or Binyamin, which was the tribe that stayed with Judah, or from Levi, from the tribe of Levi. Now, there are also the Jews from Ethiopia, we understand, are from the 10 northern tribes. They are from the tribes that were exiled, and they are associated with
Mhm.
the tribe of Dan, whatever you call him.
Mhm. Mhm.
So there are some, the Jews from India are referred to as B'nai Menashe, which means the children of Menashe. That's
Yes.
another one of the tribes that we have some inclination of where they came from, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of I'm going way off of the topic of what your question was,
That's great.
but there's a lot of people, a lot of peoples who have a tradition that they were once part of the greater house of Israel and that they have been
Mhm.
separated, since the
Yes.
10 tribes were in 722 BCE, whatever, a very long time ago. I'm not sure I got the date right, but a really long time ago.
Mhm.
um but most of the people that are Jews that are alive today are from Judah,
Mhm.
Benjamin, or Levi. That's one approach.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know, but I trust that when the Messiah, the remember we spoke. Maybe it's a good time for me to mention again that in Jewish tradition there are two messianic figures, right? Have I taught you guys this? There's the Mashiach ben Yosef, okay,
Yes. Yes.
okay, who's the preparatory Messiah figure who operates in the natural world. We don't know who he is
Yes.
either. But then when Jews say Mashiach or Messiah, they're really mostly talking about Mashiach ben David, who's
Mhm.
the descendant of David and who finishes the job, sort of, and brings us
Great.
into like full blown redemption.
Mhm.
So
Fantastic.
that's my best
Thank
response for
you.
you. Sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else a question, a comment before we finish up with each other tonight?
I just want to ask if we can get the it went really fast. I take a lot of notes, so that helps me remember things, but what you started with, can we get the full reading for that? You said um have mercy in Zion. You started with that whole thing, but I couldn't write that
Oh,
fast.
but because that's not biblical. That
Oh,
is, you need a Jewish prayer book. And if you have a complete Jewish prayer book and you look at the what's said after the Haftarah is read in synagogue, you'll find it
oh,
there.
Okay,
Okay.
what Jewish prayer book do you recommend?
Can you read Hebrew?
No.
Okay. Uh, okay. Um, so I'll send to the group. Um, wait, Elizabeth, what are you saying? Um, hold on. Okay. So there's three things I'm going to send. So there's the song, which I hope you love it as much as I do, because I really, really love it. Um,
Okay.
I'm going to send you um, a Jewish prayer book recommendation.
Okay.
And Elizabeth asked, I'm pretty sure maybe it was the first year. Who's been here since the beginning? Um, okay. Do you guys remember that I did a class maybe the first year on Mashiach ben David and
Yes.
Yes.
Mashiach ben Okay, so I'll
Yes.
find
You
the link to
addressed both
that.
messiahs.
Okay. All right. So
Figures.
I'll find the link to that and I will I'll send that just writing a note. I'll send that recording. Okay, so if you're interested in that topic, you can go back and look at what I said. But I want to mention this. Some of you may be familiar with Rabbi Yishai Fleischer. I'm not sure if you know who he is. He is a neighbor and a friend, and he called me um like just before, like 10 minutes before Shabbat. And so I thought something was wrong because, like, who call, I don't, what are you calling me for 10 minutes before candle lighting? And he said, I've been meaning to talk to you. I just have to drop this idea into your head. He said, I want to create a prayer book for non-Jews. That is a beautiful
Mm.
book that is
Wow.
with Jewish prayers, but ones that are appropriate for non-Jews to say, that is leather bound, that has,
Mhm.
it's not, I want to show, wait, hold on. I have to just turn around and see if I can find, um, okay, some of you may know this book. Um, it's called Brit Olam Prayer Book for Noahides, and it is Jewish prayer. It's in English. It's Jewish prayer, but it looks like a Word document. You know what I mean? It's not pretty. It's not laid out nicely. There's a little bit of Hebrew in it. Um, Everything is pretty much translated or transliterated. Um, but it doesn't, it's not like an inspiring book to pray from. Okay. So he wants to work with me and some other people, I'm sure, to create a prayer book based on Jewish prayer that is universal. I don't know how long that's going to take, but that's his idea. And since you mentioned it, um, I've only known about it for a few days and we haven't really moved forward on it, but it might be, in a year or two,
Tell
it
him
might be
we
something.
approve. We
What's that?
approve. Yay.
You
We
approve? Yeah.
approve.
So, and you're like the perfect, you guys are the perfect audience for it because um, you might want to say some prayers that come from a Jewish prayer
Mhm.
book, but there are some that really don't make sense for non-Jews to say.
Mhm.
So, so that's a project that hopefully we'll be working on. But in the
Fantastic.
meantime, Beth Ann, I will send something that
Mhm.
that you can get some value from now.
Right,
Mhm.
because I've been doing like the Friday night Shabbat thing with the park. They have a video, Park Avenue Synagogue in New
Yeah.
York or something. And and I do love the cantor, he's very popular from there and everything. But like they'll say, "Well, turn to page 86 in the prayer book
Right. So
for,"
the park, you should know
and
that
so
the
I
Park
really,
Avenue Synagogue is a Reform synagogue, which
what
means
does that mean?
it's a liberal synagogue, and it means that they have edited the traditional prayers, and so uh, so I'll give you an example. In the Reform movement, they do not believe in the restoration of the temple. And so all of the prayers in Judaism, I know it's shocking, right? All of the prayers in Judaism that make reference to a future temple, they excise. So
Mm.
now I'm not familiar with that particular prayer service, but in my own Jewish journey, I did spend some time in a Reform congregation, and I did find that their theology is very, very different than a traditional theology. So if you like it, that's nice, but it's not. You should just know it's not because
Mhm.
a
Well, I'm
tradition,
sure other people
right?
have. it online. It's just that's the one
No,
I
that's good.
knew to
But
find.
like by definition, an Orthodox congregation would not put its Friday night service online because it's Shabbat and we don't record. So if
I
you're watching,
wondered
yeah.
about that.
So
Okay. I
if you're
wondered how
watching it
come
live,
they.
by definition, it's
Right, right.
liberal.
So I
It's
wouldn't be able to find one that would
correct.
work like that for me anyway.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I just, I wanted to see how it worked, what it looked like. They pull the curtain and they say the ark is now open. Like it was a lot of things that was very confusing. But the main thing that, I talked to my Jewish girlfriend about, um, I grew up with her forever and she is my sounding board for a lot of these things was, well, it says turn to page 86. Like, does everyone have the same prayer book? She said you need a prayer book and that the songs that they sing are the prayer book, but they could have different
They have their own
tunes.
reform liturgy. They have taken
Like,
the traditional liturgy and sort of cut and pasted stuff. Um, and so that's what, just so you know, that's what you're getting.
right.
Okay.
So when I was looking, I pulled them up and I was like, Jewish prayer books. And I was like, oh, there's
A lot of them.
so many. Like
Right.
it's not like one, there's one that
Right.
covers everything. So if you could give me your input on that one,
I'll give you my
I would.
recommendation for sure.
Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Vicky, you'll be the last comment for
Real
tonight and then
quick.
we'll finish up.
Well, and the only thing I wanted to say is a lot of through the journey that I've had with you, I've understood that even when we do Passover as Gentiles, like, yes, I have a Siddur right here. And some of the things that I've learned, it's not even that we're doing something wrong. It's just that I'm very careful now not to encroach into what the Father, what Hashem has called us to do, and if we're doing it right, if we're not doing it right, because I always want to do everything right. And so, the journey that I've had with you, which has been amazing, is really, understanding what we as non-Jewish women, what we are encroaching on and what is okay and what is not okay.
So,
So does that make sense?
yeah, but we're trying to figure that out. Like
Right.
there's
That's what I
never been,
love.
right. So there's never been a time when a non-Jew, like since certainly since the time of the beginning of Christianity, when a non-Jew said, I want to make a Passover Seder, how do I do that? Like I don't know how it's like people are asking the Jewish people questions that we have never had to answer before. And so that's part of the shift. That's part of the messianic process that we're
Right.
all in together. But sometimes there's not like clean, easy answers
Right. Well,
for
and going
what's
back to
going
what
on.
Bethan was saying, in the Siddur, it says we are commanded to light these candles. And sometimes I'm like, well,
Ooh.
is that
Mhm.
even for us
Right.
as Gentiles?
That's
And that's why
why
I'm
this
like,
prayer book that we were
yes,
talking about will answer all those questions. If it's in there, you can say it. If it's in there, you can do it. And anything that's not for you, like for example, I believe that I mentioned this once before, that there's basically two kinds of blessings in Judaism. There's blessings on actions. Like before I eat or drink anything, I make a blessing, right? And what am I blessing? I'm blessing God who created the fruit of the trees, or who created who brought forth bread from the earth, or whatever. Those you can for sure say before your food because they're just general blessings of God. When there is a blessing, let's say over candles, on Shabbat, we say, um, I'll say it in English. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to kindle the lights of Shabbat. Well, that particular commandment does not apply to you. That doesn't mean you can't light Shabbat candles and you can say some beautiful words, but that formula, that you shouldn't be saying because that would be a lie. It's not true. You don't want to do that. But what can you say? And I'm sure that I shared this with you guys. I made a video because Bretta Graham asked me to make a video for the women in her church who wanted to know more about what could they do for Shabbat to make Shabbat special that would be appropriate for them because they're not commanded in all of the ways that the
you
Jews
should
are. And
share
so,
that again. Put that on your
okay,
list to put it,
okay,
yeah, just because that was amazing. I shared it with all my friends. So.
okay. All right. All right, those of you who are just joining us for the first time, you see we've had a few years together. There's certain things that I don't want you to feel left out or that we're talking about stuff you don't know what we're talking about. So for those of you that have been with me for a long time, I apologize for the review, but I want all of us to be like as much as possible on the same page. Okay, so I am going to again wish you a Chodesh Tov. And check the WhatsApp group both for a recording of this session and also for all of these resources that we've spoken about. Thank you so
Just
much for
real
joining
quick,
me.
how long have you been studying
This
together?
is our third year.
Oh, just third year. Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
you can cover a lot in a year, but still, I feel like I'm so far behind. Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, ladies.